The volunteer's name was Bernice Howell. She was 67 years old, and on a Tuesday morning in March 2024, she was doing what she had done every Tuesday morning for 11 years at the Knox County Historical Society, sorting donations. The jar had come in with an estate lot. Someone's grandfather had died. His daughter had brought 3 boxes of old household items: a pocket watch, some political buttons, a set of salt shakers shaped like the state of Illinois, and at the bottom of the 3rd box, a wide-mouthed mason jar filled with old coins and a few folded bills. The kind of jar that men of a certain generation kept on a dresser. The kind of thing no one thinks twice about. Bernice sorted the coins into a tray and unfolded the bills one by one. A 1963 silver certificate, a worn 5, and then a $2 bill, folded in thirds, with a date written on it in blue ink along the top margin. The way some people wrote on $2 bills, to remember when they got it, to mark it as something to keep. The date read 11/14/87. She set it aside as she always did with items that might be worth cataloging. She made a note in her log. She did not know what the date meant. But 37 years earlier, on the night of November 14th, 1987, a waitress named Sandra Pruitt had held that bill in her hand, shown it to her coworker across the counter at Duval's Diner in Galesburg, Illinois, and said, "Look at this. I never get these. I'm keeping it." She never made it home. To understand what happened to Sandy Pruitt and what it took to find the answer, you first have to go back to Galesburg, and to the diner, and to the woman herself. Galesburg sits in the flat agricultural center of western Illinois, a city of about 30,000 that carries its history with a quiet dignity particular to Midwestern industrial towns. Carl Sandburg was born there. The railroad had built it, and the railroad had shaped it, and by 1987, the railroad was contracting the way it was everywhere. But the town had not lost the character it had built around that work. Practical. Direct. The kind of place where a person was judged by whether they showed up and whether they followed through. Sandy Pruitt had grown up 2 towns over, in Abingdon, and had moved to Galesburg in her mid-20s. She was 31 years old in the fall of 1987. She worked the dinner shift at Duval's Diner on Main Street, a place that had been there since 1961, with the original counter stools and a menu that had changed only in price since Nixon was president. She had worked there for 4 years. The regulars knew her section, knew her order shorthand, a private system she had developed that only she could read, which caused exactly one problem when she called in sick and someone else had to cover her tables, and knew that she made the best coffee in the building, because she was the only one who cleaned the machine every single time. She had a 7-year-old son named Marcus. His father had not been in the picture since Marcus was 3. Sandy managed it the way she managed everything, without asking for help she didn't need, and without pretending the things that were hard were easy. Her mother, a woman named Edith Pruitt, who lived 12 minutes away in a ranch house off Seminary Street, watched Marcus on nights Sandy worked. Every Friday night, Sandy and Marcus and Edith ate dinner together at Edith's kitchen table. It was the standing arrangement. It had been the arrangement for 2 years. In November of 1987, Ronald Reagan was in his 2nd term. The VH rental store across the street from Duval's had a handwritten sign in the window advertising a new arrival: Predator. The answering machine on Sandy's kitchen counter blinked a red 1 when she came home from shifts, usually her mother, usually asking about Marcus's permission slip or whether Sandy needed her car looked at. Sandy's car, a 1982 Chevette the color of old mustard, had been looked at twice that fall already. She had a plan for the following spring. She had enrolled in a medical billing program at Carl Sandburg College, the kind of practical step that took a specific kind of courage. working full-time, and raising a child, and going back to school at 31. She had told her mother about it only after she had already paid the enrollment deposit. That was Sandy. She worked her last shift on the evening of November 14, 1987. She clocked in at 4 and was due to clock out at 11. She served 61 meals. She collected 11 tips. One of them was a $2 bill. Sandy showed the $2 bill to her coworker, a woman named Donna Kessler, at approximately 9:40 that evening, during a brief lull between the dinner rush and the late-night coffee crowd. Donna would remember it clearly, because $2 bills were uncommon enough to remark on, and because Sandy had held it up and said she was keeping it. Was going to pin it to Marcus's bulletin board, the one in his room where she kept things she thought he should see. At 11:03, Sandy clocked out. She said goodnight to Donna and to the cook, a man named Pete Garvey. She collected her coat from the back. She walked out through the diner's rear exit into the parking lot behind the building, the way she always did when she worked the late shift, because the rear lot was closer to where she parked. Donna Kessler left at 11:15. Sandy's car was still in the lot. The driver's side door was unlocked. Donna went back inside. She told Pete. Pete called the Galesburg Police Department at 11:22. Officers arrived within 10 minutes. Sandy's car was where it had been since 4 o'clock. Her coat was on the ground near the rear exit, as if it had been dropped or fallen. Her purse was in the car, on the passenger's seat, which she never left unlocked, which meant she had gone back to the car before something happened. Her tips were in the purse. Her order pad was in the purse. The $2 bill was not in the purse. She was not found until 6:18 the following morning, when a man walking his dog in a vacant lot 2 blocks from the diner came upon her. The cause of death, established by the Knox County Medical Examiner, was strangulation. She had not been robbed. Her tip money was still in the purse. Whatever had happened, it had not been about the money. What was missing was only the $2 bill. At the time that detail was noted in the case file, one item apparently absent from victims' belongings, $2 bill shown to coworker earlier in shift, not recovered at scene. It was noted. It was not pursued. In 1987, the idea that a $2 bill might be traceable, might carry a date, might be held by a specific person, might be recoverable, was not a direction any investigator thought to run. The lead detective on the Sandy Pruitt case was a Galesburg PD investigator named Gerald Mace. He was 38 years old, thorough and well-regarded, and he spent the first weeks of the investigation with the intensity that cases involving young mothers bring out in police officers who have families of their own. He had 2 daughters. He did not sleep well for the first month. Mace developed 2 persons of interest. The first was Sandy's ex, a man named Terrell Webb, who lived in Peoria and had, according to 2 of Sandy's friends, made threatening statements about Sandy in the months after their relationship ended. Mace drove to Peoria and spent 3 days on Webb. His alibi for the night of November 14th was unbreakable, a work event at a manufacturing plant in Bartonville that 47 employees could confirm, including his supervisor and a security log that placed his badge in the building until midnight. Webb was eliminated. The second person of interest was a man Donna Kessler identified as a regular in Sandy's section. A heavy-set man in his mid-40s who came in 2 or 3 times a week, always sat at the counter, and had, according to Donna, been paying Sandy more attention than was comfortable in the weeks before her death. Donna described him as a man who drove a dark-colored pickup truck, and who she believed worked somewhere in construction or trades. She did not know his name. He had always paid cash. Mace canvassed the diner's regular customers without success. No one could identify the man from Donna's description with certainty. There were no credit card records to pull. Cash only. No name, no address. 2 months after Sandy's murder, the man Donna had described stopped coming to the diner. Permanently, no one noted the timing at the time. No one thought to cross-reference the disappearance of a regular customer with the 2-month mark after the case had generated local news coverage, and then gone quiet. The institutional failure in the Sandy Pruitt case was the cash. In 1987, there was no mechanism for identifying a cash customer at a diner counter. No camera. No record. Just Donna's memory of a face and a truck, which was not enough for a warrant and not enough for a charge. Mace documented everything he had. He submitted his reports. He kept the file active for 2 years, then 3, then 5. By 1993, it had transferred to the cold case designation that meant open, and still there, and waiting. Edith Pruitt raised Marcus. She moved him into her house on Seminary Street within a week of Sandy's murder, and raised him there the way Sandy would have wanted, which Edith understood without having to be told, because they were that kind of mother and daughter. Marcus was 7 when he lost his mother. He was in 2nd grade. His teacher sent a card to the house. He grew up knowing what had happened and not knowing who had done it, which is its own particular and unresolvable grief. By 1995, 8 years had passed. Marcus was 15, doing well in school, playing basketball, growing into something that Edith could see was his mother in him. The practicality, the humor, the way he solved problems without drama. He did not talk about the case much. He asked Edith, once, when he was 17, whether she thought they would ever know. She told him she believed they would. She did not say it to comfort him. She said it because she believed it. Gerald Mace had retired from the Galesburg PD in 2002. He had kept a personal summary of the Pruitt case, not the file, which belonged to the department, but his own notes, his own list of what he knew and what he didn't. He reviewed it once a year. He had not found a new avenue in 20 years, but he reviewed it because some cases do not allow themselves to be set down. By 2005, Donna Kessler had moved to Moline. She still thought about Sandy on November 14th each year. She still saw the $2 bill clearly, Sandy holding it up under the diner lights, that specific detail of something small and bright in an ordinary night. By 2010, 23 years had passed. The Chevette was long gone. Duval's Diner had closed in 2004 when the original owner retired, and the building had been a nail salon and then a tax office. Marcus was 30. Living in Chicago, working in hospital administration, the field his mother had been taking a night class to enter when she was killed. He had framed her enrollment confirmation from Carl Sandburg College and kept it in his apartment. He had not planned to. He had found it in a box of his grandmother's papers after college, and once he held it, he could not put it away. The case was reassigned to the Knox County Cold Case Unit, a unit that had been formalized in 2019 in the person of Detective Rosario Fuentes, a 34-year-old former Chicago PD investigator who had moved to Knox County for reasons that had nothing to do with cold cases, and had ended up working them anyway, because she was the kind of investigator who could not read a file without wanting to finish it. She read the Sandy Pruitt file in the fall of 2021. She noted Donna Kessler's statement about the $2 bill. She noted that the bill had never been recovered. She noted that no systematic effort had been made to trace it in 1987. There was no real method for doing so. In 2024, there was. This work takes weeks of research, and every case we cover represents a real person whose family never stopped waiting. If that matters to you, take a second to like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get back to Sandy. When Bernice Howell's notation about the $2 bill from the estate donation reached Detective Fuentes' desk, passed along through a routine inquiry Fuentes had filed with local historical societies and antique dealers 18 months earlier, asking to be notified of any $2 bills with handwritten dates from the 1980s, she looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at it again. The date on the bill was November 14th, 1987. She pulled the case file. She read Donna Kessler's statement. She called Donna Kessler, who was now 71 years old and living in Moline, and read her the date. Donna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's the night." The mason jar had come from the estate of a man named Eldon Marsh, who had died in February 2024 at the age of 81 at a nursing facility in Knoxville, Illinois, 22 miles from Galesburg. His daughter Patricia had brought the estate items to the Historical Society without examining them closely. Eldon Marsh had been a plumbing and heating contractor. He had worked in Galesburg and surrounding Knox County through the 1980s and 1990s. He had moved his operation to Knoxville in 1988, approximately 2 months after Sandy Pruitt's murder, a move his daughter understood as a business decision, cheaper property, a new territory. She had always understood it that way. Fuentes requested the original case file records on the regular diner customer Donna Kessler had described. Heavyset, mid-40s in 1987. Trades work. Dark pickup truck. Stopped coming to Duval's in early 1988. Eldon Marsh in 1987 was 44 years old, a plumbing and heating contractor who drove a dark blue Ford F-150. His business records showed multiple job sites in downtown Galesburg, including 2 within 3 blocks of Duval's Diner, active through the fall of 1987. He had paid cash. Always, the $2 bill was submitted to the Illinois State Police Crime Lab for forensic examination. The process used was vacuum metal deposition, a technique capable of recovering latent fingerprints from paper surfaces that are too degraded for standard powder methods, by depositing a thin layer of gold and then zinc onto the bill in a vacuum chamber to reveal the ridge patterns beneath. The technique had been refined significantly in the previous decade and was now reliable enough for evidentiary use in cases where the surface had been handled repeatedly and then stored. It works by treating the paper's surface as an archaeological site, layer by layer, revealing what was left by human hands decades ago. Fingerprints that survived in the molecular structure of the paper long after the ink faded and the memory of the moment was thought to be gone. The bill yielded 2 partial prints. One was consistent with a female hand, likely Sandy Pruitt's own, consistent with the grip of someone holding a bill up to show it to a coworker. The other was a fuller partial, likely deposited when the bill was folded and tucked away. When run through AFIS, the National Fingerprint Database, it returned no match. Eldon Marsh had no criminal record and had never been printed. Fuentes requested a DNA sample from Patricia Marsh, who provided it willingly and without hesitation, understanding that she was helping to close a case that had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with a woman who had been a stranger to her and was not a stranger anymore. The familial DNA comparison took 3 weeks. The result confirmed that the fingerprint on the $2 bill was consistent with a first-degree biological relative of Patricia Marsh. Her father's hands had been on that bill. Eldon Marsh had been, in every account that Fuentes could compile, an unremarkable man. He had run his contracting business competently. He had been married for 30 years to a woman who predeceased him. He had 2 daughters who described him as quiet, private, not a man who talked about himself. He had attended a Methodist church in Knoxville for 20 years. He had coached a youth soccer team in the early 1990s, the first team, the one his younger daughter was on. He was remembered as patient, as steady. What he had done in the rear parking lot of Duval's Diner on the night of November 14, 1987, was not visible in any of that. It had no face there. It had lived underneath a normal life for 37 years and had been carried to a grave in February 2024 at the age of 81. And it would have stayed there. Gone with him. Buried with him. Answered for by no one, except for one thing. He had kept the bill. Why a person keeps such a thing, what that says about the human capacity for self-deception. The way a person can hold something that connects them to the worst act of their life and not let it go is not a question that has a clean answer. What the evidence showed was simpler. He kept it. It survived him, and his daughter donated it in a mason jar to a historical society where a 67-year-old volunteer unfolded it on a Tuesday morning and set it aside because the handwritten date seemed worth noting. Patricia Marsh cooperated fully with the investigation from the moment Fuentes explained what they had found. She sat with investigators for 3 hours. She answered every question. At the end of the interview, she asked only one thing. She asked whether she could speak with Sandy's family. She said she wanted them to know that she had had no idea. Fuentes told her she would pass that along. Because Eldon Marsh was deceased, there would be no trial, no sentence, no courtroom moment where a family could look at the man who had taken Sandy Pruitt from them. The Knox County State's Attorney's Office formally closed the case in September 2024, issuing a statement naming Eldon Marsh as the individual responsible for Sandy Pruitt's murder, and noting that the case had been resolved through fingerprint evidence recovered from a $2 bill preserved in private possession for 37 years. Marcus Pruitt was 44 years old when he received that call. He was the same age his mother had been when she died, a fact that had been coming toward him for years, the way certain arithmetic cannot be avoided. He was at work in Chicago when Detective Fuentes reached him. He stepped away from his desk and took the call in a stairwell, because that is the kind of call you take somewhere private. He did not say much on the call. He asked Fuentes to confirm the name. He asked her to confirm what the evidence showed. Then he said, "Thank you for finding it." She told him it had found itself in a way. He said, "That sounds like my mom." Sandra Pruitt was 31 years old. She made the best coffee in the building because she cleaned the machine every single time. She had a shorthand only she could read, and a plan she had already paid the deposit on, and a son she was raising with the same practical courage she brought to everything. She had saved a $2 bill on a Friday night because she thought Marcus would like it. Because she was always thinking about what Marcus would like. She never got to put it on his bulletin board. But 37 years later, it remembered exactly where it had been and who had been holding it. Marcus Pruitt took a personal day from work the week the case was closed. He drove from Chicago to Galesburg, a 3-hour drive he had not made in a long time, and he went to the diner lot, which is now a parking structure, and he stood there for a while. Then he drove to his grandmother Edith's house on Seminary Street. Edith is 91 now, and she still lives there. And when Marcus came through the door, she already knew, because Fuentes had called her first. They sat at the kitchen table for a long time. They talked about Sandy. They ate sandwiches, the way people sit together when something terrible has finally, after a very long time, become something that can be set down. The Knox County Cold Case Unit has updated its evidence review checklist to include currency items, specifically the recovery and forensic examination of bills with handwritten notations, dates, or identifying marks found in estate donations and historical collections. It is one line in a checklist. It will not undo what the Pruitt family waited 37 years to know. But somewhere in that line is Sandy's name, doing quiet work she never got to finish. What does it say about the nature of guilt that a man kept a $2 bill connected to his worst act for 37 years? And what do you make of the fact that he never destroyed it? Does a case closed after a suspect's death, no trial, no sentence, no confrontation, still count as justice for the family, or only as an answer? And when you think about Marcus Pruitt driving 3 hours back to Galesburg to stand in a parking lot where a diner used to be, what does that tell us about what people carry and what they need to finally put down? Justice came for Sandy Pruitt after 37 years. Stories like hers remind us that truth, however late, always finds its way to the light. If you believe that too, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More solved cold cases are waiting in the description. Thank you for watching.